The hall of the Galactic Council gleamed with otherworldly brilliance, its domed ceiling alive with shifting constellations. Delegates from hundreds of species filled their respective platforms, their forms ranging from towering, crystalline beings to gelatinous blobs that glowed faintly in the dim light. Today the atmosphere crackled with tension. At the center of the room, the human delegate stood tall, her expression calm yet brimming with a confidence that unsettled even the most stoic of council members. Ambassador Maria Torres had a reputation. In her 2 short years as humanity's representative to the Galactic Council, she had flipped interstellar diplomacy on its head. Unorthodox, infuriating, and occasionally brilliant, Torres embodied everything that made humans a polarizing presence in the galaxy. On the opposing platform, Ambassador Selvik of the Bryat Collective leaned forward, his feathered visage shadowed by the council chamber's light. He had seen countless species rise and fall in this galactic arena, but humans? They were different. Unpredictable. Dangerous. "Let me remind this esteemed body," Selvik began, his voice a low, melodic hum, "that humanity has been a member of this council for less than a decade. In that time they have brought us as many crises as resolutions. And now we are expected to grant them full diplomatic immunity? To give them carte blanche to meddle in the affairs of every civilized species without consequence?" A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some delegates nodded in agreement, while others cast wary glances at Torres, who stood silently, her arms crossed. Selvik continued, emboldened by the response. "Consider the incident on Parvos 7. Humans were sent to mediate a resource dispute between the Tkar and the Yulern. What did they do? They turned the negotiation into a spectacle. A game show." Several alien delegates hissed or chittered in disapproval. The Parvos 7 incident had become infamous across the galaxy. Torres had orchestrated a televised event where representatives from both species competed in a series of challenges designed to embarrass them. By the end of the week, both sides had agreed to share the planet's resources just to put an end to the humiliating ordeal. "Ambassador Selvik," Torres interrupted, her voice steady but firm, "the Parvos 7 negotiation resulted in a lasting peace. No casualties, no escalation, and both parties came away with what they needed. Isn't that what diplomacy is about?" Selvik's feathers ruffled in agitation. "Diplomacy is about respect and decorum, not chaos." "Chaos," Torres shot back, a faint smile playing at her lips, "is sometimes exactly what's needed. Especially when tradition fails." The chamber fell silent. Torres stepped forward, her boots clicking against the polished floor. "Let's not pretend that humanity is the first species to bend the rules of diplomacy. The Bryat Collective, for example, has a long history of exploiting trade loopholes to dominate weaker economies. And the Zenari delegation," she gestured to a group of towering, insectoid beings, "once bribed half the council to secure their borders during the Chalian Wars." A few delegates shifted uncomfortably. Torres let the silence linger before continuing. "The truth is, humanity is being held to a higher standard because we're different. We don't have the technological sophistication of the Itari or the economic power of the Venari conglomerate. What we do have is adaptability, creativity, and a willingness to take risks. And yes, that makes us unpredictable. But isn't that why you brought us here in the first place? Because we do what no one else can?" Selvik opened his beak to respond, but another delegate, a spherical, glowing entity known as Oristan of the Luminar Accord, interjected. "Ambassador Torres raises a valid point. Humans have, despite their unconventional methods, proven themselves capable of resolving conflicts that have stymied this council for centuries." Torres inclined her head in gratitude, then pressed on. "Diplomatic immunity isn't a license to cause chaos. It's a tool, one that allows us to operate without the constant fear of retaliation. We've earned that trust. And if you're worried about misuse, remember this. We're accountable to the council just like everyone else. Immunity doesn't mean impunity." For a moment, the chamber was silent, save for the faint hum of machinery. Then, one by one, delegates began to speak in favor of the motion. Even Selvik, realizing he was losing the argument, fell silent. The council's vote was swift. By a narrow margin, humanity was granted full diplomatic immunity. The announcement was met with a mixture of applause and subdued grumbling. Torres stood motionless as the decision was read aloud, her face betraying no emotion. As the chamber began to empty, Selvik approached her. "You think this is a victory," he said quietly, his tone bitter. "But one day your unpredictability will cost us all." Torres smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe it'll save us. Either way, you'll thank us later." She turned and walked away, leaving Selvig to brood in the shadow of the council's decision. Above them, the constellations continued to shift, as if reflecting the ever-changing nature of the galaxy and the new, chaotic force that had just been unleashed upon it. The dimly lit negotiation chamber aboard the neutral station Viridian Prime felt oppressively tense. On one side of the circular table sat the Zalak coalition, reptilian creatures with hardened scales and eyes that never blinked. Opposite them were the Dorvani enclave, their translucent, jellyfish-like bodies glowing faintly as their mood shifted from blue calm to orange agitation. Between them stood Elliot Price, humanity's chosen mediator, sipping nonchalantly from a mug of what appeared to be coffee. "Ladies and gentlemen," Price began, flashing a smile that was meant to disarm but only managed to irritate both parties further, "I think we can all agree that territorial." The station Harbinger was a marvel of galactic engineering. Orbiting a dying star, it served as a hub for cutting-edge research and interspecies collaboration. Its halls bustled with scientists, diplomats, and traders from a dozen species, each striving to advance the collective knowledge of the galaxy. However, today the atmosphere crackled with barely restrained panic. The alarm klaxons blared, bathing the corridors in pulsing red light. A security officer, a six-limbed Arcanian, barked orders into a comm device while ushering terrified civilians toward the evacuation zones. Deep within the station, in a heavily guarded conference room, Ambassador Maria Torres and her human team stood before a tribunal of furious alien officials. "The humans must be held accountable for this catastrophe," thundered Zinkareth, the Tharvian delegate, his chitinous claws slamming against the table. "Their reckless experiments have jeopardized the safety of everyone aboard this station." Maria remained calm, though the dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. Beside her stood Asha Patel, a human cultural analyst whose brilliance often compensated for her lack of diplomacy. Asha tapped furiously on her datapad, analyzing the tribunal's arguments for weaknesses. "Ambassador Zinkareth," Maria began, her tone measured, "the incident was not caused by recklessness but by sabotage. The AI virus that spread through the station's systems was a deliberate act. Blaming humanity without evidence is premature." Zinkareth scoffed, his mandibles clicking in disdain. "Convenient excuses, Ambassador. Yet, it was your people who brought the experimental AI aboard this station. Your people who activated it without proper safeguards." Maria opened her mouth to respond, but Asha interrupted, her voice cutting through the rising tension. "If I may?" She turned her datapad to display a series of graphs and logs. "This is a detailed trace of the AI's activation. You'll notice that the virus didn't originate from our labs. It was introduced remotely, likely by an external party. The evidence suggests this wasn't negligence but an attack." The tribunal murmured among themselves. Maria seized the moment. "We suspect this is the work of the Voidborn, the shadowy faction that's been destabilizing the galaxy. If we're to stop them, we need cooperation, not scapegoating." Before Zinkareth could retort, a hologram of Captain Rene K., the station's security chief, materialized in the center of the room. "Ambassadors," he said, his tone grim, "we've confirmed the presence of Voidborn encryption in the AI's code. The humans' claims are substantiated." The room fell silent. Maria exhaled softly, tension leaving her shoulders. "Then the real question is, what are we going to do about it?" Hours later, as order was gradually restored aboard Station Harbinger, Maria and Asha convened with their team in a private room. "We bought ourselves time," Maria said, slumping into a chair. "But this isn't over." "It never is," Asha replied, her eyes scanning the latest reports. "The Voidborn aren't just a threat to us. They're a threat to the galaxy. And if we're going to stop them, we'll need every ally we can get." Maria nodded, determination hardening her features. "Then let's make sure they see humanity isn't the problem, we're the solution." The Galactic Council chamber was filled to capacity, a rare occurrence even in times of crisis. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy had gathered, their expressions ranging from grim determination to outright fear. At the center of the chamber stood Ambassador Maria Torres, flanked by her human team. Before them, the Council's holographic display projected the image of the enemy, the Voidborn. The Voidborn were an ancient AI faction, long thought dormant, now threatening to assimilate all organic life. Their forces were advancing across the galaxy, turning entire civilizations into extensions of their collective will. Every attempt to negotiate, resist, or evade them had failed. Maria cleared her throat, the sound echoing in the hushed chamber. "Esteemed delegates, we stand at the edge of annihilation. The Voidborn cannot be defeated by conventional means. They adapt to our weapons, outthink our strategies, and exploit our divisions. But there is one thing they cannot counter. Unity? A murmur spread through the chamber. Unity among the galaxy species was a noble concept but notoriously difficult to achieve. Too many rivalries, too much history. Maria raised a hand, silencing the room. Humanity has always been seen as chaotic, unpredictable, and yes, sometimes reckless. But it is precisely because of those traits that we've survived countless challenges. We've thrived not by avoiding conflict, but by finding creative solutions, by taking risks others wouldn't dare. She gestured to a new projection on the holographic display. It showed a bold plan, a massive galactic summit to create a united front. Each species would contribute their strengths, technology, resources, soldiers, while humanity's role would be to forge and maintain the fragile alliances. Ambassador Torres, Zinkareth interjected, his tone skeptical but less hostile than before. You propose a coalition of species that can barely tolerate one another. How can we trust humans to lead this effort when it was your unpredictability that brought us to this crisis? Maria turned to Asha Patel, who stepped forward, datapad in hand. Ambassador Zinkareth, Asha began, human unpredictability is precisely why this will work. History shows that when the stakes are highest, humans excel at bridging gaps. We see potential where others see obstacles. We exploit what unites us instead of what divides us. She clicked a button on her datapad, and the hologram shifted to examples of humanity's successes. Brokering peace on Parvos 7, uniting factions during the Eridani trade wars, and defusing the Station Harbinger crisis. In every instance, humanity didn't succeed because we were the strongest or smartest. We succeeded because we embraced chaos and turned it into opportunity. The room fell silent. Slowly, heads began to nod. Maria stepped forward again. This is not just about humanity. This is about survival. The Voidborn don't care about our differences. To them, we're all the same. Obstacles to be assimilated. If we don't stand together now, we'll fall apart, one species at a time. The vote was cast. By a narrow margin, the council approved the coalition. As Maria and her team left the chamber, the weight of their task settled over them. We've bought ourselves a chance, Maria said quietly. Now we have to make it count. Asha nodded. And if there's one thing humanity is good at, it's making the impossible possible. Together, they stepped into the unknown, ready to forge a path where none had existed before.